In Africa's boardrooms, a few names do not merely command attention, they provoke expectation. Say Tony Elumelu, and the room hears more than a businessman. It hears banking, power, capital, entrepreneurship, and a stubborn belief that Africa can be built from within. But that belief did not emerge in comfort. It was forged in risk, in volatility, and in institutions that could fail. In a continent rich in promise, yet repeatedly tested by weak infrastructure, policy shocks, and global uncertainty. So the real question is, how did a young Nigerian salesman become one of Africa's most influential investors without inheriting an empire, without escaping adversity, and without giving up on the continent when many others did? Tony Onyemechi Elumelu is Nigerian-born, Nigerian-trained, and by his own account began far from privilege and prestige. On his official profile, he traces his rise from selling copiers to becoming one of the continent's most consequential business leaders. He later earned a master's degree in economics from the University of Lagos, after earlier studying economics at Ambrose Ali University, formerly Bendel State University. But credentials alone do not explain what came next. In the 1990s, Nigeria's banking sector was not a tidy cathedral of confidence. It was crowded, fragile, and often unstable. Elumelu entered that world young, ambitious, and largely unknown. Then came the first major gamble. He acquired a distressed institution, Crystal Bank, became its chief executive, and renamed it Standard Trust Bank. On his official biography, he is described as having taken a struggling bank and within 7 years pushed it into Nigeria's top tier. UBA's own leadership profile says he turned the financial distress STB into a top 5 player. But surviving Nigeria's banking woes was only the beginning. In 2005, the Central Bank of Nigeria forced a dramatic sector-wide recapitalization requiring banks to raise their capital base to 25 billion naira. The exercise cut the number of banks from 89 to 25. It was one of the most consequential restructuring in modern Nigeria finance. That same year, Elumelu led the merger of Standard Trust Bank and United Bank for Africa, which UBA described as the largest merger in sub-Saharan Africa's banking sector at the time. That merger changed the scale of the story. What had been a turnaround play became a continental project. Today, UBA says it operates in 20 African countries as well as the United Kingdom, the United States, France, and the UAE, serving more than 45 million customers and employing about 25,000 people group-wide. But even that ascent was not linear. In 2010, Nigeria's central bank imposed a 10-year tenure limit for bank chief executives. Elumelu's run as UBA CEO ended under that regulatory shift. UBA's 2010 CEO statement explicitly stated that he would retire on July 31, 2010, in accordance with the new rule. Reuters reported at the time that the policy capped bank CEOs at 10 years. Years later, Elumelu reflected on that period as a profound turning point in his life. And this is where the story becomes more than biography. Because some people read disruption as an ending, Elumelu read it as a second act. In 2010, he founded an investment company, and Tony Elumelu Foundation, the investment that spanned around power, energy, financial services, hospitality, real estate, healthcare, and technology, operating across 24 countries worldwide. Then he gave his worldview a name, Africapitalism. The Tony Elumelu Foundation defines it as a call to action for businesses to make decisions that create both economic prosperity and social wealth. In plain terms, it is the argument that Africa's private sector must do more than make money. It must help build markets, expand opportunity, and strengthen society itself. That philosophy would soon be tested against reality, because betting on Africa is not a slogan, it is an operating choice. And Africa does not offer easy terrain. Elumelu himself has acknowledged that entrepreneurs often operate in a tough operating environment, and that success on the continent requires not just vision but also patience, perseverance, and advocacy for a more enabling business climate. That context matters even more now. As of early 2026, the IMF projects global growth at 3.3%, but it still faces risk from policy uncertainty and geopolitical tensions. For sub-Saharan Africa, the IMF says growth is showing resilient, yet remains exposed to tight borrowing conditions and a deterioration in the global trade and aid landscape. Nigeria itself reflects that tension. Reuters reported in February 2026 that annual inflation slowed to 15.10% in January, its 10th straight monthly decline. Days later, Reuters also reported that Nigeria's net foreign exchange reserves had risen sharply to $34.8 billion by the end of 2025, signaling stronger buffers and improved confidence after reforms. In other words, there are signs of stabilization. Yes, but nobody serious would call the terrain easy. And yet it keeps building. Within this broader ecosystem of influence, the institutions aligned with a strategy are still expanding. Transcorp announced record 2025 revenue of 544 billion naira and profit after tax of 136 billion naira. UBA continues to deepen its pan-African and global reach. And the Tony Elumelu Foundation says that since 2015, it has funded over 24,000 entrepreneurs, trained 2.5 million Africans, helped create more than 1.5 million jobs, and supported businesses that have generated over $4.2 billion in revenue. That is why Tony Elumelu matters, not because he became wealthy. Africa has seen wealthy men before, not because it speaks about transformation. Many do. He matters because he tried to turn an idea into infrastructure, banking into reach, capital into enterprise, philanthropy into pipeline, and disruption into reinvention. Time recognized him in its 2020 Time 100 list, but perhaps the more enduring measure is this. When the continent's risks are named, currency pressure, weak infrastructure, policy inconsistency, global shocks, he has chosen again and again not to retreat from Africa, but to invest deeper into it. So maybe Tony Elumelu's story is not really about one banker. Maybe it's about a tougher proposition. Africa will not be transformed by hope alone. It will require institutions, capital, discipline, risk appetite, and leaders willing to build in the middle of uncertainty.